So we have we have a program called the European Young Leaders, where we recruit 40 top leaders in their fields, from public, private, cultural, arts, politics, etc. And we have two here today. One, as I said, who's, found a planet. Another one's an architect who actually thought of working with the other one and creating a city in space. And so we thought, what better than to ask two entrepreneurs who have an interest in space but actually have been active, and as I said, one found a planet, is to really think about the opportunity space presents for entrepreneurship, but also their perspective will bring in, I think, a different one to what we hear in other places, because I suppose it gives you the vantage point of not being institutional, but actually, if you want to be an entrepreneur in space, what does it take? So firstly, I'm going to invite them to say a little bit about themselves, and then we'll have a conversation. So Guillem, if I can start with you. Yes.
Hey.
There you go.
Yes, that works. Okay. So, well, thanks for the invitation, Dharmendra, Alfredo, good friend with everybody here. So because Dharmendra didn't have time, I'll give you a bit of an introduction that will give me my entrance to what I want to discuss later, where I'm coming from, because otherwise it will be a bit strange where this person is coming, what has these strange ideas. So I'm a scientist by training. I had my PhD on an ESA mission called Gaia, which is a very successful one. So my PhD was in 2002, 2007, because Gaia was supposed to be launched in 2009, and this is when interesting things start to show. But it was launched in 2014. A number of similar things are happening all the time. Also, I worked in the US because I was doing science, working on exoplanet science, something very exciting, got the Nobel Prize in Physics a couple of years ago by other people, not myself. And then I work in Germany and the UK developing instrumentation from ground-based observatories. So, and also a bit on science communication, because I was, for example, things involved like the IAU Name Exoplanet competition a couple of years ago. 110 countries submitted names for stars and planets. People got excited. We let the countries organize themselves with a process with some regulations of the EU. So it's not just that I do science. I just wanted to give you an idea that I'm trying to touch a number of things. So in these efforts of trying to be a bit more connected with society, one of the things I do is come to the Friends of Europe events and the European Young Leaders program, which is useful because then you meet interesting people like Alfredo and people from all other places like politicians and things like this that we don't meet a lot in science. So as a result of this, we created a network, a collaborative network called SONET, which means Sustainable of World Network, to try to develop concepts not from the space engineering point of view, but trying to actually have the conversation with other branches of society, other academics. For example, we are space scientists, let's say, but there are biologists, there are chemists, there are social sciences, there were a couple of lawyers as well. Biology, other things like this. So to try to formulate projects that allow us to have these conversations and try to develop concepts. So as a result of this, we got a couple ideas from ESA actually being funded. We also designed the Martian city concept, as Alfredo might talk a bit more later, and you will see that this was an exercise to actually have very interesting conversations also on sustainability of our planet, which is it's important. But again, also society is eager to contribute to these kind of things, and this needs to be used. We did things, I'm doing collaborations with other people like chemists. For example, we're trying to do rocket fuel from lunar metals, things like this. Epigenetic studies on space, so trying to see how low gravity or high gravity will affect development of organisms. So really trying to do experimental multidisciplinary efforts. And also, for example, with University of Manitoba, we have a collaboration in the Arctic where they have this style of construction that will be very useful in places very cold like Mars, where they use certain materials, and we are kind of using this synergy to train architects. So also participated in these strategic panels or discussions, something called Astronet, that will inform governments about what's the plans for astronomy in the next decade. And the ESA Voyage 2050, which was an initiative that ESA launched, the science division, launched to try to plan missions 30 years from now to see where we are going. This is where I start to have problems, and this is where things start to collide a little bit what I started at the beginning. My thesis was in a mission that was launched 10 years later when I finished my thesis. So having these big missions, because these are very particular missions that are going to cost several billions, a 30-year plan doesn't make sense these days. Doesn't make sense for me, because I will be retired, I will not be contributing to these missions, I will not be exploiting them. For the young people, don't make sense, because they are moving much faster. The world is rolling very fast. There is high geopolitical risk, as we have seen. I wrote an article about this in the ESA Voyage 2050, was largely ignored, but I'm proud to say that it was before the pandemic, before the Russian crisis, before the energy crisis that's rolling. And more or less, the message was this: the geopolitical risk cannot be ignored. So we don't have to engage to these monolithic single missions that are going to cost billions, and then something happens somewhere in the world and the thing that doesn't work. It's hard to justify to the public, to the taxpayer. The people is not motivated to work on this, even the engineers, and at least I'm sure they are bored of working these kind of things. So, message also, the scientists will adapt. Yeah, we like mega million projects, but we can also do things at different scales. We will do with what we are given, with the tools that are there. So don't worry too much about that, of not funding these mega billion missions, because we are going to manage. My message here is that we would work much better with something like Artemis, like Joseph Achbacher mentioned. We want something exciting as a continent, as people. Culturally, we want to go to the moon. We want to have a permanent base there, do operations on orbit. We want to have a city or something on Mars. We want to develop infrastructure on space. We don't want to spend the mega billions in the missions. We want to develop this infrastructure, and then the science will happen inside this infrastructure. It's different, it's very different going to Chile and take your telescope, you build an 8-meter telescope, transport it to Chile, plant it in the desert, observe, and use this to detect dark matter in the universe. That would cost billions, but we don't need to do that, right? There are roads, there are facilities, there is technology, there is a developed country that also benefited from having these infrastructures there. That allows now to do very good science. We have the European Southern Observatory, is a major world-leading facility that is never mentioned, and still world-leading even in the geopolitical concept. So, also, one last thing that I'm doing is actually trying to do this locally. I'm not just blah, 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 but we actually, at local level, space is cheap enough these days that for a few million, which means it's in the budget of a city or a region, you can actually have your space mission to do your science, your observation of Earth, your whatever experiment you want to run. You don't need to go through the space agency. I know that that sounds a bit contradictory in the context of what we have heard, but my suggestion here is the space agency or the big EU should set these goals, these visions, this road where all together, but let the local regions, the entrepreneurship, don't interfere with local entrepreneurship ecosystems. Help them to make the things that they really want locally. Maybe it's science, maybe it's surveillance of forests, things like this. Let this happen, because this will happen. We are doing it. We are developing our small satellite. Hopefully in 2-3 years we are going to launch, not 30. It will be very exciting. The young people are exciting, young engineers, male and female, all contributing. And they will see things happening, and we will learn a lot just by doing things. So that would be my message.
Thank you. And I think people here want to know whether your local initiative has, I mind the pun, taken off at all in terms of the municipality or somebody funding it. Has it been funded?
It's happening through next-gen resilience funds, because suddenly Europe decided, okay, let's do all these funds, and it's a good thing because it let the regions kind of managing. Maybe people might discuss about it. I'm just saying my opinion here, and you can raise counter opinions. I'm happy with this, but I think this has very good outcome, which is we will, at the end, we will build this infrastructure and these new startups by localizing and then letting these things grow, not just trying to build them from the top.
Thank you very much. Alfredo, share with us your perspective, but a little bit about you.
So I'm Alfredo Muñoz, originally from Spain, but I have been living in 5 different continents, and for the last 20 years, I have been living in the US. So I had the experience more of an entrepreneur in the US, but being European, wanting to find the level of innovation and level of support for entrepreneurs that I find in the US to bring it here to Europe. So I'm going to share a little bit of my experience about how we can hopefully try to do that. So a bit about the work that we are doing. My background is in architecture and in space architecture, but for the last 2 years, we have been creating what we are calling the futures. And it's taking the technologies that we might have heard about the metaverse, like virtual reality, and blockchain as a way to integrate governance and digital assets and an economy to create future scenarios. Some of those future scenarios can be about how a new society could be in off-world colonization, like those, for example, on Mars or on the moon. The opportunity of that is that we can use the virtual world to test things up. It's almost like a space analog where things can be tested in a safe environment, but still understand the complexities of the relationships that we will have as a society and integrate it all in one ecosystem that we can learn from. So that ecosystem has been built, as I mentioned, for the last couple of years with the support of a multidisciplinary team. We have members from NASA, we have experts in different fields, many of them supported with Guillem and the group that we organized, the INSONET, experts in life support systems, astrobiology, blockchain, sociology, astrophysics. And that is critical because innovation cannot happen in silos, especially in complex fields like we are talking about in the space. It has to come from collaboration from fields that are very different. So in that sense, one of the things that I would like to bring from my personal experience building the Futureverse is the power of cross-pollination. And that's indeed what we have talked a lot in Friends of Europe, that the young European leaders have done for me, to have the opportunity to meet Guillem, for example, an astrophysicist, and me coming from an architectural background, to be able to put together a team of experts that we have been able to find a way to create a self-sufficient settlement on Mars, where there are no resources, and where by bringing that into the digital environment, we are bringing relevant insights that can help us how to solve urgent problems on Earth related to climate change or social inequality. So first thing I would like to bring is, again, cross-pollination from different experts in multidisciplinary fields. The other thing that I would like to bring to the conversation is innovation. From my experience in the US, the level of support that the ecosystem for entrepreneurship brings in the US is substantially higher than here in Europe. I have 10 patents. One of the patents that I filed was in the US 5 years ago, and then I filed the same patent through a PCT here in Europe. That particular application led already to 3 patents in the US. I have heard only one single comment from the European Patent Office. That means I have not got a single patent from the European Patent Office, but they are milking us every year, charging us for maintenance fees. So while I have to pay every year in the European Patent Office year after year without hearing only once in 5 years, in the US, I paid only once and I got 3 patents. So this is a way to compare how, as an entrepreneur, I'm going to be interested in investing into innovating in Europe when the ecosystem does not support protection of innovation. Then I will go to US with the same application, I get 3 patents. The same application led also to a patent in China. So 1 patent in China with the same application, 3 patents in the US, 0 here, charging me or charging our team every single year just to keep the application alive without even hearing from the USPTO. This is something that, again, is eye-opening about how different the ecosystems are in Europe versus other parts of the world. Finally, I would like to bring from my experience the support that in the US, the relationships between the private sector and the public sector bring. The US, from my experience at least, is much more inclined into the public sector taking risks. And we have been talking about venture capital, but I was discussing before with Guillem an interesting point that here, when we are talking about the public sector being involved with the private sector, it's usually with very big companies that involves almost no risk. And that is helpful, that is great, but for a small company like a SpaceX 10 years ago to become a SpaceX, that meant that a lot of people had to take the risk of a small company to potentially fail. So when there is the management of risk is always thinking like, well, I want to be sure that I put my money and my time and my support in a company that I know is not going to fail, that mentality is not a mentality that can lead to innovation. Because unfortunately, when we are trying to innovate, we are trying to do a lot of things like the one we are doing now, about using the technologies of the metaverse to create future scenarios in a highly immersive environment. We don't know if it's going to work. We have NASA as a collaborator. We have great minds, but we still don't know if that's going to be the next thing in technology and design. But in the US, I'm noticing that, again, NASA is interested in collaborating. We have other companies that are showing interest. We didn't try that much here in Europe. I hope that Joseph can put us in touch with the right people to bring Europe into what we are doing. But again, the ecosystem in general, from my personal experience, at least in the US, is much more supportive of taking risks, innovation, and bringing people from different backgrounds that can lead to cross-pollinating ideas. So I would like to just leave that with the initial thoughts.
Thank you very much. I should comment, I didn't mention to all of you that we have our resident cartoonist, Tonu, who will punctuate the conversation and discussion with his reflection, which will hopefully be both humorous but important and serious. That's where, that's where that all comes from. Both of you, thank you. But there's a kind of there's a central message there about, the aptitude and the conditions for entrepreneurs like you to actually do great things is not in Europe, in effect. And it actually, that you're better off in more enterprising countries, or like the US, than being in here. And like, the comment you make about patents is not new. People have been saying that in any field, actually. And I'm just, I wish there was someone here from the European Commission who could speak to that. But, I mean, what would you like to see happen? Because we've seen things change dramatically in the past 3 years. Health, economics, security now, okay? What should we do? For example, should we, together with ISA, create a major sandbox later this year with all entrepreneurs that you're interested in, both in the US and Europe? Could we play a part? I mean, or should someone else play a part? Is that something that would help move the dial on this? Alfredo, then Guillem.
For sure. I think that anything that is about enhancing innovation and taking risk and having the possibility of investing time and money that might go south, but one might make it. That one that might make it might pay off for all the other 99 that don't make it. And that mentality is something that it will definitely be leveraged by creating a sandbox, as you are saying, of resources. It can be financial resources, it can be human resources, it can be connections, it can be ideas that might come by people from different backgrounds coming together in the same space.
Great, thank you, Guillem. And I'll bring the two people who want to ask a question.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make the comment about the risk aversion in Europe in general. It's not only the private sector, it's also the public. I just want to make a comment and put an example. I will not say names because I don't want to point and shame, but there's this mission in ISA, very good mission, opinions. It costs 150 million euros. So now I talk that we are want to have this small satellite, which is going to do comparable science, I would say, probably producing similar. This mission is going to cost 4 million. So it's about a factor of 40 times cheaper than that. And we will say, oh, but you will fail. If you give me 40 attempts, I'm sure that not only will make it in the 8th attempt or the 20th, but not the 40th, and I will have learned a lot during the road. So we have this mission that I'm not saying names, was supposed to be one of the fast ISA small missions and ended up being a monster of 150 millions. And that all came from risk aversion. The initial concept was something that should cost 20, 25 million, but no, we have to follow these protocols and now we have to test everything, and the whole thing just exploded. So it's not only about the money that we put in, it's about this mindset, and maybe it's regulation, it's in the culture, but it's a regulatory thing. People that want, I will take risk if I know that I'm not going to be punished if I fail, for example. In Europe, in Spain, the laws, when a company fails, it's tremendous for the people that started those companies. You want a simple life at some point. I think that's the key point. one of the key points, this risk aversion, but it's because entrepreneurs are not protected. There's a mindset this is not working in space or in other sectors.
Absolutely, because you hear a lot about government saying that they're prepared to, learn from failure, but public accountability sometimes stops them from actually really putting money where their mouth is. Please, sir. You're going to get a mic. Do introduce yourself.
Yes, so Michel Praat from the European Space Agency, head of the European Space Agency in Brussels, of the office in Brussels. What I would like to say is that we perhaps need to reform or to create new financial mechanisms and new institutional mechanisms. When I met, it was in 2011, in another life, when I met people from Google and Apple, they told me, they say, Michel, if we exist today, it's thanks to a system that was called, and that is still called in the United States, Small Business Innovation Research. It exists a little bit in the UK, and it starts also in the Commission, but as to me, with two figures that are too low, a budget that are too low in order to allow the development of that. What is that? It's in fact combining at the same time venture capital, state aid, and procurement policy, public procurement. If you combine it, if you don't say, I help a starter and I do it with state aid, and 6 months later or 2 years later, no, it's not my problem any longer. He has to go to the venture capital market. If you do that, you miss, in fact. And the little not yet company is missing the bridge and is falling into the gap. And people from Google and Apple told me we had the chance to know this in the US and to bridge this gap. And I think so, it's not a huge reform, but it's a reform we need, as to me, in the Union. Second remark, I mean, it's fine. I agree with new space, with everything, even if the definition of new space sometimes, SpaceX receiving millions by the NASA because they don't want to do it any longer, okay? And they externalize it, okay? It's not really new space. I mean, it's combining the profits of Tesla and the deficits of other things. It's a form of engineering in the way you are doing business, but it's not, for me, necessarily what I could call new space. And you need, and this is more to the first speaker, I think you need still in life an agency and a public sector reflecting on the long term. Because everything is not to be made in 6 months in a garage and so on. You need, when we started the Hubble Space Telescope, in space in general, the Gaia missions, the Envisat mission, this cannot be done without a strong public sector, being the Commission, being ESA, being other people. But we need this, and we need this vision, even if it's in 30 years, in 50 years. Because if we don't have this vision, we fall into a space that is happy, that is great, that is everything you can call it, but it is not long-term. Sure. And in Europe, with our values, with our European values that are different from other people, we need this. We are not sending millionaires to space. We are doing space differently.
Indeed you are, and very good point, Michel. But there's something about the ecology. You need the ecology of change has to have an institution that does the long-term thinking, that's disciplined. And I'm not saying entrepreneurs aren't, but you need that structural facet. But what we're hearing is that we need to operate at a different speed, at a different ecological level. And what we don't have in Europe is, and I agree with you, that combined, blended finance that has genuine risk associated with it. And that's probably an idea that we will develop here with these colleagues. I know a couple of you want to come in. Before I bring you both in, very briefly, this gentleman here has been extremely patient, and Mike is on its way to you. And please do introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, citizens. My name is Angelos Harlaftis. I'm a consultant. A lot of years here in Brussels. I occupied also from 2011 with the space sector. And with the previous administration, we tried to assist by our approaches to bring to the Union what you have spoken about, which we are speaking the same things all the years. But the main discussion for us is about the US, not about Europe. We are bringing Europe here. We have a vision for Europe. And I was talking about the Mars communities because the Mars societies, which they have a budget with Dr. Zubrin and a very important person from the other side of the Atlantic, they are doing their job, but we, the Europeans, we are not doing our job, not only in Mars, as I'm proposing for the Mars communities, but also for all the citizens. Because I proposed instead of mimicking the Americans, they have their system. It functions or it doesn't function. We shall see. We have our own values, as you have very well spoken, and our values are based on the citizens. So I propose to the previous administration of ISA to organize a scheme with the universities, the SMEs, and the citizens, and immediately they did it in the incubation way, not in the businessman way. So it was dead after a little bit. The amount of money, the budget was given for this, didn't do a lot of things, I think. Also, other approaches we brought, they were incubated immediately. ISA gives a lot of opportunities for the startups. Right now, they have a very good, how could we say, platform in order somebody who has a startup idea to come and get some millions to spend for various reasons. But these are not on the substance of the issues, because the budget of the ISA is, we know how it is. 1 to 3 with the Americans. The Chinese friends, which I introduced to the previous administration, they are doing very well, and the Indians, who they are not here.
So if I may push you just, you've been very good at being able to describe the nature of the problem. What would you like, or what's your final comment?
Everybody understands. When I made the proposal about the entrepreneurship, immediately the Americans, they built in Luxembourg, this space thing they built. It is an advantage for us, but it's not doing the heart of Europe.
Okay.
Here I'm with the friends of Europe, and our proposal has a heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. So, lady here at the front, can I have a mic here? Again, as ever, do introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Erika Casajuana. I'm the deputy representative of the Catalan government to the EU. I found very interesting how Mr. Anglada-Escudé mentioned space projects from cities, from regions. Catalonia has very much this mentality. We have launched a nanosatellite. We are preparing a second one, and a space agency ourselves. He also mentioned using next generation EU funds. And I would like to draw the attention that in some countries, these funds are being disbursed in an extremely centralistic way. In fact, Catalonia leads an initiative called Regions for EU Recovery, asking for regions to have a greater say in how these funds are used. And I would like to ask the Commission to please take care of this, to make sure that the subsidiarity principle and the multi-level governance principle are applied. It's not enough that the Commission recommends these next generation EU funds to be implemented and designed in accordance with the stakeholders, the regions and the cities. In some countries, in Spain most notably, this is not happening at all, and please take care of that.
Okay, thank you very much. But have you been able to use any financing for your space work in your area?
I don't think so. I will check, but...
Be good to know. Thank you very much.
will.
Gentleman just next door there, and then final yourself, and then I'll go back to our protagonists. Please do introduce.
Thank you, Olivier Lemaitre, Eurospace, the Association of the European Space Industry. Very quickly, I'm sorry to be a bit conservative here, but it's been a few years that we are hearing in Europe, mostly in institutional settings.
You may need to hold your mic up closer. Yes, lovely.
It's been a few years that we are hearing in Europe what I would call buzzwords like entrepreneurship, innovation, venture capital, and all this is interesting, all this is useful in the space sector. But there is one thing that we somehow completely forgot to talk about. It's becoming, in my opinion, somehow a taboo, and it's about the market. And we are trying in Europe to reproduce with those ingredients such as innovation, private fund. We are trying to reproduce the recipe that would somehow allow the emergence of European SpaceX, if I can put it that way. And we forget to speak about actually the market. And for all those new companies in the US, most of the market is still a public market. And we have a budget in the US that is 6 to 7 times higher than in Europe. So in Europe, we don't have the market, but we are still trying to reproduce this environment that we are observing and admiring in the US. And I think we are delusioning ourselves a bit.
So what would you like then? So, okay, I take your point, because it's almost like, why can't we have those billionaires here? And why can't we have the conditions to create billionaires here? But what's the alternative when the governments are not funding or not spending as much at all as US, China, etc., in the EU? What's the alternative approach we should take from your perspective?
The alternative is either we disappear as a space power. That's certainly a scenario. But of course, the other alternative is that finally we try to do something intelligent, we increase the institutional funds, and we try to coordinate them. Again, institutional funds, when we say in Europe that they are 6 times less in Europe than in the US, not only are they 6 times less, but they are not coordinated at all. It's the addition of money from several member states and the EU. So,
okay, great. Thank you.
I don't have a miracle, but
no. Thank you very much. There is a point about how you coordinate money to make it. It's more about how you're wiser in how you spend it and smarter about how you spend it rather than the size of the cash. Thank you very much. Final question.
No, it's a comment. Good morning. I'm Roya Ayazi. I'm the Secretary General from NEREUS, Network of European Regions Using Space Technologies. You stimulated me to comment. Making reference to what Olivier Demetre said, what can we do to scale up to get more investment into space as Europeans? In my point of view, it's great what the company is doing and the innovation, but they need to sell it much more as solutions. What we see as regions is that several regions have space into their smart specialization strategies. We have regions that invest strategically in space, also from other funds than space funds. And how can we raise is selling space better as a solution and accessing other funding opportunities, structural funds, environmental funds, and going more out, looking more for funding outside space sector. And that goes through selling it better as a solution.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go back to our protagonists just for some wrap-up points. If you want to, you don't have to. Yeah? So let me be a bit more provocative. Are you just a buzzword?
No.
Are you just a buzzword? I'm livening things up a little bit. We heard that actually, whilst all this is really sexy, we need to be serious. And, innovation and entrepreneurship are buzzwords.
Okay. Well, I took notes, so I think I actually agree with many things that have been said here. These are different aspects of things. So it was said here that there has to be a vision, true. There has to be a big vision, but actually the SOIH 2050, from my point of view that I'm a scientist, it's depressing. It's depressing to do it in 30 years. These are experiments that are relevant now. I don't want to work on that. So it's good. We have the agencies, we have the government set the good vision, but then we were discussing here, we need incentives, we need a client, the public client is the big one in the US, so let's do that, but don't make the EU manage all these things. All these regions want to do these things, so create the mechanisms, protect the entrepreneurship, make insurance, so in case they broke or they bankrupt, they go to prison or work on something else. So there are a number of mechanisms that can be done. I think the problem is being diagnosed from different angles, and actually we could reach a synthesis that would work. It's just a matter of sitting a number of people around the table, looking at the users. At the end, the user experience thing I just learned very recently, the tech is using this a lot, but it's actually a very well-paid job, actually. We should probably do the same exercises at the different user levels, administration, citizens, and things like this, and then create this policy that works for the users, not for the industry that it's there but doesn't know where to go, really doesn't have a clear mandate. I'm not voted by the citizens. So that would be my closing remark.
Thank you very much, Guillem.
Yeah, my closing remark.
Guillem, can you just switch that off? Great.
My closing remark would be, what about if we combine a top-down strategy with a bottom-up? So in Europe, we have a lot the mentality like, okay, the government, the big organizations push down strategy and then things happen, right? What about if we also support the bottom up, which is let's support the entrepreneurs. They are the small little people that are trying to make something happen, sometimes crazy, and maybe one of them might be able to bring something interesting. Just for everyone to realize, everyone was laughing at the SpaceX in NASA in the beginning. Everyone was not thinking that SpaceX was going to succeed, and they proved them wrong. Many of them might not have been able to make it, but we have a good example. Let's learn from scientists that they learn by trial and error. Scientists try things without getting attached to the results, and they see what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes we might be able to learn that if we combine the top-down with a bottom-up approach, we might be able to get interesting results. So that would be my conclusion for today.
Thank you both for being, provocative, stimulating, a really good discussion. That's why we said it's an alternative summit, because, where are you going to get two entrepreneurs like that have done the kind of things they have? But also, it kind of pokes an eye into received wisdom and thinking. So I hope you all found that effective, reflective, and stimulating, and food for thought as we move forward. So thank you both very, very much. Appreciate your contribution.